A window to ancient Egypt. Have you ever heard of a mummy? It is not a monster from a scary movie. A real mummy is the body of a person or an animal that has been saved for a very long time. The skin and bones have not disappeared. They have been preserved. This means they were specially treated so they would not decay or rot away. Many ancient cultures around the world made mummies, but the most famous mummies come from ancient Egypt. The Egyptians were masters at this. They believed that preserving a body was very important for the person's spirit after they died. These mummies are like special time capsules. They help us understand how people lived and what they believed in thousands of years ago. The word mummy might sound a little strange. It comes from an Arabic word, mumia, which means bitumen. Bitumen is a black, sticky substance like tar. When people from later times found Egyptian mummies, they saw that the bodies were covered in dark resins. These resins had turned black over many centuries. They thought the bodies were coated in bitumen, so they called them mummies. It was a simple mistake, but the name stayed. So, when we talk about a mummy, we are talking about a very old, preserved body. These bodies give us a direct link to the people of the past, especially the incredible civilization of ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt was a land of great wonders. It had giant pyramids, mysterious tombs, and powerful kings called pharaohs. The people of ancient Egypt had a very strong belief in life after death. They thought that when a person died, their journey was not over. It was just beginning. They were going to a new world, a place called the Field of Reeds. To get there and to live there forever, they needed their body. That is why they started making mummies. They wanted to make sure the body was safe and sound. It was a key part of their religion and their entire way of life. The practice of mummification lasted for over 3,000 years in Egypt. So, a mummy is much more than just an old body. It is a story. It tells us about deep religious beliefs. It shows us amazing scientific skills for that time. It gives us clues about health, diet, and daily life from a world that vanished long ago. When we look at a mummy, we are looking at a person who once walked along the Nile River, who had a family, and who hoped for an eternal life. Studying them is a way of listening to the quiet voices of history. It helps us piece together the puzzle of ancient Egypt, one preserved body at a time. It is a respectful way to learn from those who came before us. The ancient Egyptians had a very clear idea about what happened after a person died. They believed that every person was made of different parts. One part was the physical body. Other parts were spiritual, like the Ka and the Ba. The Ka was like a person's life force or a spiritual twin. It was born with the person and stayed with them. After death, the Ka needed to have a place to live. It also needed food and drink, which is why Egyptians left offerings in tombs. The Bi was more like a person's personality or soul. It was often shown as a bird with a human head. The Bi could fly out of the tomb during the day and visit the world of the living. For an Egyptian to have a successful afterlife, their Ka and Ba had to be able to find and recognize their body. At night, the Ba would return to the tomb to reunite with the body. This reunion was very important. If the body decayed and disappeared, the Ka and Ba would have nowhere to return. They would be lost forever, and the person's afterlife would end. This was a very scary thought for the ancient Egyptians. They wanted to live forever in paradise. To make sure this happened, they had to stop the body from decaying. This is the main reason they developed the complicated process of mummification. A preserved body was a permanent home for the soul. The journey to the afterlife was not easy. The deceased person had to travel through a dangerous underworld. They would face many challenges, monsters, and tricky questions. To help them, the Egyptians placed a special book in the tomb called the Book of the Dead. This was not really a book, but a collection of spells and prayers written on a long roll of papyrus. These spells would help the person overcome the dangers of the underworld. After passing all the tests, they would reach the Hall of Two Truths. Here, their heart would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the person had lived a good life, their heart would be light, and it would balance with the feather. The god Thoth would record the result, and the person would be welcomed into the afterlife by the god Osiris. They would then live forever in the Field of Reeds, a perfect version of Egypt with no sickness or sadness. But if their heart was heavy with bad deeds, it would be heavier than the feather. A terrible monster named Ammit, who was part crocodile, part lion, and part hippopotamus, would eat the heart. This was the worst thing that could happen. The person would cease to exist completely. Preserving the body was the first and most crucial step in ensuring they could even face this final judgment. Making a mummy was a long and complicated job. It was also very expensive. Only the rich, like pharaohs, nobles, and important officials, could afford the best mummification. The process was done by special priests called embalmers. They had a lot of knowledge about the human body. They worked in special workshops, often in tents set up near the Nile River. This location was important because they needed water to wash the body. The whole process took about 70 days to complete, a period of time that was filled with many steps and religious rituals. The embalmers had to be very careful and respectful as they worked on the body. The very first step was to wash the body. The embalmers would wash the deceased person with water from the Holy Nile River. They would also use palm wine, which helped to clean the skin and kill some of the bacteria. This washing was not just for cleaning, it was also a symbolic act. It was like a baptism, purifying the body and preparing it for its sacred journey to the next world. After the washing was complete, the embalmers would lay the body on a special slanted table. This allowed any fluids to drain away while they worked. They knew that the inside of the body would decay the fastest, so that is what they had to work on next. The next part was the most delicate and, for us, a bit gruesome. The embalmers had to remove the internal organs. They knew that the organs, especially the brain, stomach, and intestines, were full of water and would rot very quickly. To remove the brain, they used a long, thin metal hook. They would carefully insert this hook up through the person's nostril. Then, they would swish it around to break up the brain into small pieces. Finally, they would turn the body over and let the brain drain out through the nose. The Egyptians did not think the brain was important. They believed that the heart was the center of all intelligence and emotion, so they left the heart inside the body. After removing the brain, the embalmers made a small cut on the left side of the body. Through this small opening, they would reach in and carefully take out the other internal organs. They removed the liver, the lungs, the stomach, and the intestines. Each organ was individually washed and preserved. The empty body cavity was then cleaned out again with palm wine and spices. This was a critical part of the process. If any part of the organs or moisture was left inside, the body would not be preserved properly. The embalmer's skill was like that of a surgeon, even though they were working on someone who had already passed away. Once the body was empty and clean, the most important part of the preservation process began. The embalmers needed to dry out the body completely. Moisture is the main cause of decay, so removing all the water was essential. To do this, they used a special kind of salt called natron. Natron is a natural salt that is found in dried-up riverbeds in Egypt. It is a mixture of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda. This salt is very good at absorbing water. The embalmers would cover the entire body, inside and out, with piles of natron salt. They would pack the inside of the body cavity with small bags of natron as well. The body was then left covered in natron for about 40 days. This long period allowed the salt to slowly pull all the liquid out of the skin, muscles, and other tissues. It was a natural dehydration process. The embalmers had to check on the body regularly. They needed to make sure it was drying evenly. This stage was crucial for the long-term survival of the mummy. If the body was not dried properly, it would rot from the inside, even after it was wrapped. The 40-day period was also a time of mourning for the family. While the embalmers did their scientific work, the family would be praying and preparing for the funeral. After the 40 days were over, the natron salt was removed. The body looked very different now. It was much thinner and the skin was dry and leathery. It was also much darker in color. The embalmers would then wash the body one more time to remove any remaining salt. The body was now permanently preserved and would not decay. But it did not look very lifelike. The next step was to make the mummy look more like a living person again. They would stuff the empty body cavity with linen, sawdust, or other materials to give it a more rounded, natural shape. The embalmers also paid attention to the appearance of the mummy. They would sometimes place small stones or onions under the eyelids to make the eyes look less sunken. They would anoint the body with special oils and resins. These oils helped to make the skin more flexible, and also gave it a pleasant smell. The resins, which came from trees, would create a hard, waterproof layer over the skin, protecting it from moisture and insects. This was the final step before the wrapping began. The body was now a clean, dry, and secure vessel, ready to be wrapped for its journey to eternity. The final stage of mummification was the wrapping. This was a very long and careful process, and honestly, it could take up to 15 days to complete. The embalmers used huge amounts of linen. Linen is a cloth made from the flax plant, which grew really well in Egypt. A single mummy could be wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen strips. The wrapping was done with great ceremony. Priests would recite spells and prayers as each layer of linen was applied. This was not just about covering the body. It was a religious ritual that protected the deceased and prepared them for rebirth in the afterlife. The wrapping was like creating a cocoon for the soul. The wrapping began with the head and neck. Then each finger and toe was wrapped individually. This took a lot of time and care. After the individual digits were wrapped, the arms and legs were wrapped separately. As the priests wrapped the body, they would place special magic charms, called amulets, between the layers of linen. These amulets were meant to protect the body on its dangerous journey through the underworld. The most important amulet was the scarab beetle. A scarab amulet was often placed over the mummy's heart. It had a special spell written on it from the Book of the Dead, asking the heart not to speak against the deceased during the final judgment. As more and more layers of linen were added, the body began to take on its familiar mummy shape. The embalmers would use sticky resin to help glue the bandages together. This made the wrappings hard and strong, like a protective shell around the body. Sometimes, a portrait mask was placed over the head and shoulders of the mummy. For a pharaoh like Tutankhamun, this mask would be made of solid gold. For less wealthy people, it might be made from painted plaster or a material called cartonnage, which is like ancient papier-mâché. This mask was an idealized image of the person, helping their soul to recognize the body. Finally, a large cloth, or shroud, was wrapped around the entire body. It was secured with long linen bands that ran from head to foot. The mummification process was now complete. The mummy was placed inside a coffin, or sometimes a series of coffins, one inside the other like Russian dolls. The coffin was then placed in a large stone box called a sarcophagus. After 70 days of work, the mummy was ready for its funeral procession and its final resting place in a tomb. The family believed that their loved one was now fully equipped to navigate the underworld and achieve eternal life. For the ancient Egyptians, the preservation of the physical body was not just a tradition. It was an absolute necessity for eternal life. They believed the body was the anchor for the soul in the physical world and the afterlife. It was considered the permanent home, the earthly vessel to which the spiritual elements, the Ka and Ba, must return each night. Without a recognizable body, these spiritual parts would become lost and homeless. This meant the person would suffer a second and final death. This fear of non-existence was, honestly, the driving force behind the entire complex and expensive industry of mummification. The body was a house for the soul, and that house had to stand for eternity. This belief explains why the Egyptians went to such great lengths to make the mummy look as lifelike as possible. It was not just for appearance. The Ba, which they imagined as a bird with a human head, needed to fly back to the tomb and immediately recognize its old body. If the body was decayed or damaged, the bee might not know it. That's why portrait masks were so important. The mask provided a perfect, unchanging face for the Bey to identify. It was an idealized face, showing the person in their best form, ready for an eternity of youth and health. The body inside the wrappings and the mask on the outside worked together as a beacon for the soul. The tomb itself was also seen as an extension of this house for the soul. It was called the House of Eternity. Inside the tomb, the Egyptians placed everything they thought the person would need in the afterlife. This included furniture, clothing, jewelry, tools, and even food and drink. They painted the walls of the tomb with scenes from the person's life, and with pictures of farming, feasting, and hunting. They believed that these paintings would magically come to life for the deceased person. The mummy, resting in its sarcophagus, was the owner of this house, and all the items and paintings were there for its eternal use and enjoyment. This deep connection between the body and the soul shows how differently the Egyptians thought about death compared to many cultures today. For them, death was not an end, but a transition, a temporary interruption before a new and everlasting existence. The body was the bridge between the world of the living and the world of the gods. By preserving it, they were not clinging to the past. They were actually investing in their future. Every strip of linen, every prayer recited, every amulet placed was a step towards ensuring that their house of flesh would last forever, guaranteeing a home for their spirit for all of time. The most famous of all Egyptian mummies is, without a doubt, Pharaoh Tutankhamun. He is often called the Boy King because he died when he was only about 19 years old. His tomb was discovered in 1922 by a British archaeologist named Howard Carter. What made this discovery so amazing was that the tomb was almost completely untouched. For over 3,000 years, it had been hidden from robbers. Inside, Carter found thousands of incredible treasures, including golden chariots, jewelry, and Tutankhamun's famous solid gold death mask. The mummy of the young king was resting inside a series of 3 coffins, with the innermost one made of pure gold. Studying Tutankhamun's mummy has taught us a lot. Scientists used X-rays and CT scans to look at his body without unwrapping it. They learned that he was about 5 feet 6 inches tall. They also found that he had a club foot and probably had to walk with a cane. In fact, over 100 walking canes were found in his tomb. For a long time, people thought he might have been murdered by a blow to the head, but modern scans show that the damage to his skull likely happened during the mummification process. It is now believed he may have died from an infection in a broken leg, combined with other health problems like malaria. Another very famous mummy is that of Ramesses II, also known as Ramesses the Great. He was one of the most powerful pharaohs in Egyptian history. He ruled for 67 years and lived to be over 90 years old, which was very unusual for that time. His mummy is incredibly well preserved. We can see his face clearly, with his thin nose and strong jaw. When his mummy was discovered, it was suffering from decay due to fungus. In 1976, the mummy was flown to Paris for special treatment. The French government even issued the mummy its own Egyptian passport, listing his occupation as king, deceased. This really shows the respect people have for these ancient rulers. There is also the mummy of Queen Hatshepsut, one of the few women to rule Egypt as a pharaoh. For a long time, her mummy was missing. In 2007, archaeologists announced they had identified her. They found her in a simple tomb, not her own grand temple. The key piece of evidence was a single tooth. A box with Hatshepsut's name on it was found to contain a tooth. A CT scan showed that this tooth perfectly matched a gap in the mummy's jaw. Studying her mummy revealed that she was an older woman, probably in her 50s, who was overweight and may have died from bone cancer. These famous mummies are not just objects, they are the real remains of powerful people who shaped history. When scientists began to study mummies with modern technology like X-rays and CT scans, they uncovered many secrets and surprises. These methods allow them to see inside the mummy's wrappings without damaging the body. One of the biggest surprises was learning about the health and diseases of the ancient Egyptians. For a long time, we thought of ancient Egypt as a healthy, natural place. But the mummies tell a different story. Scientists have found evidence of many diseases we still have today, such as arthritis, which is pain in the joints. They also found that many Egyptians had terrible problems with their teeth because their bread contained a lot of sand and grit from the grinding stones. Another fascinating discovery relates to the mummification process itself. We used to think that the embalmers always followed the same exact steps. But by scanning many different mummies, scientists have learned that there were many variations. For example, they found that in some later periods, the embalmers didn't always bother to remove the brain. Sometimes they just left it inside. In other cases, they took out the organs, wrapped them, and then put them back inside the body instead of in canopic jars. These discoveries show that practices changed over thousands of years, and perhaps not all embalmers were as skilled as others. Sometimes the surprises are very personal. CT scans can create 3-dimensional images of a mummy's face, allowing us to see what these ancient people might have looked like. We can also find out their age when they died, and sometimes even the cause of death. In one case, scientists found a mummy of a woman who had died during childbirth. The scan showed the small skeleton of her baby still inside her. In another, they found evidence that a pharaoh named Seqenenre-Ta II died a violent death in battle. His mummy has terrible wounds on its head, caused by different weapons like axes and daggers. These discoveries provide a very human and often tragic connection to the past. Perhaps one of the most unexpected findings is what else was wrapped up with the mummies. Robbers in ancient times often tore through the wrappings to find valuable amulets. But sometimes, modern scientists find things the robbers missed. They have found small personal items tucked into the bandages. More surprisingly, they have found mummies that were not what they seemed. One coffin, labeled for a human, was found to contain a mummy made of mud and grain, shaped like the god Osiris. In another case, a coffin thought to hold a princess was found to contain a baboon instead. These surprises show that there is always something new and unexpected to learn from inside the sarcophagus. Studying Egyptian mummies is like reading a very special kind of history book. This book is not written on paper with words. It is written on the bones, skin, and DNA of the people who lived long ago. Each mummy provides a huge amount of information that we cannot get from ancient texts or temple walls alone. The texts tell us about kings, gods, and battles. But the mummies tell us about real people. They tell us what they ate, what diseases they suffered from, how long they lived, and even what they looked like. They give us a personal glimpse into the daily reality of life in ancient Egypt. By studying the DNA from mummies, scientists can learn about the population of ancient Egypt. They can see where people came from and how the population changed over time. This genetic information helps us understand the wider history of the Mediterranean region. We can also learn about the evolution of diseases. By finding viruses or bacteria in mummies, scientists can study how these germs have changed over thousands of years. This knowledge can even help modern doctors understand and fight diseases today. The mummies are a valuable medical archive, preserved for millennia in the dry sands of Egypt. The study of mummies also helps us understand ancient Egyptian culture and religion in greater detail. We can see how their burial practices changed over 3,000 years. We can compare the mummification of a rich person to that of a poor person. This tells us about their social structure. The amulets and spells found with the mummies give us direct insight into their deepest beliefs about life, death, and the universe. They show us what they feared and what they hoped for. This is a much more intimate understanding than we can get from just looking at the pyramids and temples they left behind. In the end, mummies connect us to our shared human past. It is easy to think of ancient Egyptians as mysterious figures from a long-lost world. But when we see the preserved face of a man, woman, or child, we are reminded that they were people just like us. They had families, they worked, they got sick, and they hoped for a good future. Studying them respectfully teaches us not only about their history, but also about our own. They are silent teachers, and by listening carefully with our modern tools, we can hear the amazing stories they have to tell.